Welcome back to MFO, everybody. Today you're getting the juice. You are getting the juice when it comes to talking about a Ned Rig. I have got a suggestion and some tips on how to rig a Ned Rig, and these are suggestions and tips that came from a Bassmaster Classic Champion, and they were passed along to me, and I'm going to pass them along to you on today's episode. Stick around, guys. You're not going to want to miss this if you throw a Ned Rig. Welcome back to MFO, everybody. I'm Mark Fisher, and we're talking about Ned Rigs. Threw a Ned Rig quite a bit on the last day of the tournament at Kentucky Lake, and it really worked out well. And when I made that decision to throw a Ned Rig, I said, hey, I got to go back to rigging up a Ned Rig the way that I was taught to do it by my friend Jeff Gustafson, Gussie. And he would show us how to rig these up, and he got it down to a science. And I got to admit, I kind of looked over his shoulder and watched him do it for quite a few times to kind of see how to do that. And I'm going to show that to you today. So the biggest thing when we're talking about rigging a Ned Rig, and some of these tips are mine, and then what I'm going to show you. So the first thing, you're talking about just a regular Ned Rig hook from Z-Man. I think you guys know that a lot of them come with the weed guard. My first thing that I'm going to do in 90% of the situations is I'm going to cut those weed guards off. I don't need weed guards if I'm fishing around rocks. That's a place where I'm going to be throwing a Ned Rig quite a bit. And so in this situation, I'm going to cut those weed guards off. So that's my first step. I'm going to grab my wire cutters, and I'm just going to cut those weed guards off. All right, so weed guard is off, just have my Ned Rig. Now, the next thing, I'm not saying I don't ever use it, but I'm not going to use the Z-Man TRD. I'm not going to use some other Ned Rig baits. What I am going to use from Z-Man is called the Hula Stick Z, okay? The Hula Stick Z. And the bait looks like this. Doesn't look like much. Now, the first thing you need to see is that this actually has little tentacles on the end, and you have to make sure that you peel those little tentacles off and separate them so that they all separate. And then the next thing that you need to do is just stretch that stuff out and get those all loose. All of a sudden you see that those tentacles are actually tentacles. They're not all bunched up. By doing that, you get those tentacles to separate out. That's the most important part of this bait. Now, the other part about this bait, when you compare it to the size of the Ned Rig hook itself, it's a little bit long. And so what I'm going to do, the second thing I'm going to do after I've got these tentacles separated, is I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut that bait about 1 inch. I'm going to shorten that bait by about 1 inch. And so I've taken that bait now and shortened it down. So now all of a sudden this bait is really about the size of a TRD Ned Rig, okay? But it's got the little tentacles at the end. And now finally, the next thing that I'm going to do is thread this bait onto my Ned Rig hook. so that it sits straight on that hook. Now, if you can see, I've got a little bit of a gap there, and that is not what I want. So I want to be able to get that to sit flush, and that's important. In fact, it's so important that, and this is the part that Gussie used to painstakingly take time to do and to show us, that we're gonna measure it out and get it to go right on so that it goes all the way up to the head. And now that we've got that to the point where it is flush right up on the head, now what I'm going to do is actually back it off a hair, and I'm going to take my super glue and I'm going to put just a dab of glue right in that gap, and then push it together. And now that's going to hold that bait right up against that head. And so I've got these tentacles that will separate out, and that is the Ned Rig that I like to throw. So it is the Z-Man Hula Stick Z. Try that out the next time you're fishing a Ned Rig and see if you don't get bit more using the Hula Stick Z for your Ned Rig. Guys, I hope you appreciate this information. If you would, please hit the subscribe button. Send us your comments and your thoughts about this. Today's Friday. We hope you have a great weekend, and we will see you again next week for another episode of Mark Fisher Outdoors. Take care, everybody.